January 21st, 2026. While you were sleeping, the President of the United States stood before world leaders in Davos, Switzerland, and said something that should make every American and every European sit up and pay attention. "I won't use force to take Greenland," Trump declared. Then he added, "We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable." Read that again. The president just told NATO allies that America could crush them militarily if it wanted to. Not Russia, not China, our own allies. This isn't just another news cycle. This is the moment the post-World War II order started collapsing in real time. And if you want to understand what's really happening, unfiltered, no propaganda, just the raw math and geopolitics that most analysts won't show you, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see everything unfolding in 2026. Yesterday marked exactly 1 year since Donald Trump returned to the Oval Office, and the numbers are staggering. 228 executive orders in 365 days. Let me give you context for how insane that is. Joe Biden signed 77 in his first year. Barack Obama signed 40. Trump himself only signed 55 executive orders during the first year of his first term. The only president in modern history who signed more was Franklin D. Roosevelt, 381 executive orders, but that was 1941, and we were mobilizing for World War II. Trump has governed by executive fiat more aggressively than any president since FDR. He's rewritten immigration policy, reversed every major climate initiative from the Biden administration, restructured federal agencies, imposed sweeping tariffs, and fundamentally altered America's relationship with the world, all without passing a single major piece of legislation through Congress. Yesterday, Trump held a 104-minute press conference where he displayed photos of alleged criminals arrested in Minneapolis, claimed gas prices are $1.99 in many states, the actual national average is 2.78, and defended an ICE agent who shot and killed an unarmed American mother of 3 in her car. He said he understands both sides of that shooting. Then he boarded Air Force One for Davos. Well, actually, he boarded it twice. The plane had to turn around mid-flight due to an electrical issue. Eventually, he made it to Switzerland, where this morning he delivered remarks that have European capitals in crisis mode. But here's what you need to understand. The executive orders, the press conferences, the Davos speech, these are all theater. The real story is what's happening beneath the surface. And it started on January 18th with a single announcement that could reshape the entire global order. On Saturday, January 18th, Trump announced that 8 European countries would face escalating tariffs: Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland. 10% starting February 1st, 25% by June 1st. The reason? These NATO allies sent troops to Greenland for a training exercise after Trump repeatedly threatened to take the island the easy way or the hard way. So America is now economically punishing its closest military allies for defending territory that already belongs to our alliance. Let that sink in. We're not talking about trade violations. We're not talking about defense spending shortfalls. We're talking about the United States using economic coercion to acquire the sovereign territory of a NATO founding member. A territorial demand between Western powers that hasn't happened since Hitler annexed Austria in 1938. The tariffs would stack on top of existing rates, already averaging 15% on EU goods and 10% from the UK. We're talking about combined tariff rates potentially hitting 40%. That's Smoot-Hawley territory, the 1930 Tariff Act that accelerated the Great Depression. European leaders moved immediately. Emergency meetings were convened. The 8 targeted nations issued a joint statement calling this a threat to the alliance itself. They warned that the tariff threats undermine transatlantic relations and risk a dangerous downward spiral. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas was blunt. China and Russia must be having a field day. They are the ones who benefit from divisions among allies. And she's absolutely right, because while Trump obsesses over Arctic real estate, Beijing is watching with undisguised satisfaction. But here's what most people don't understand. Europe isn't defenseless. They have a weapon, and it's massive. European countries own $8 trillion of US bonds and equities. That's almost twice as much as the rest of the world combined. China holds roughly $800 billion in US treasuries. Japan holds about $1.1 trillion. Europe holds more American debt than the next 7 countries combined. Think about what that means. The United States runs chronic budget deficits. We need foreign investors to buy our debt. Europe has been the largest buyer. What happens if they stop? Deutsche Bank's George Saravelos put it perfectly. In an environment where the geoeconomic stability of the Western alliance is being disrupted existentially, it is not clear why Europeans would be as willing to play this part. Translation: if America is going to treat Europe as an adversary, why would Europe continue financing American deficits? Do the math with me. If European institutions dump even 20% of their US holdings, that's $1.6 trillion flooding back into European markets. Treasury yields spike. The dollar crashes. American borrowing costs explode. Every 1% increase in treasury rates adds hundreds of billions to federal interest payments. We're talking about a financial weapon that could trigger a crisis that makes 2008 look like a practice run. But Europe has another tool, something they designed for China, but are now considering using against their supposed closest ally. It's called the anti-coercion instrument. It was adopted in 2023 and has never been used. Until now, French President Macron is reportedly pushing for its activation. What does this thing do? It could limit trade in goods and services, target foreign direct investment and financial markets. It could exclude American companies from EU tenders, strip patent protections from American pharmaceuticals, and freeze US tech companies out of the world's second largest market. Boeing could be blocked from European contracts, Apple could lose intellectual property protections, Google and Microsoft could be shut out of public procurement. European capitals are considering $93 billion in retaliatory tariffs. This is the trade bazooka, never before used. And right now, European diplomats are debating whether the United States of America qualifies as a hostile economic power engaging in coercion. Now let me show you something that barely made headlines but explains everything. Last summer, the US and EU signed what they called the Turnberry Agreement, named after Trump's Scottish golf course where it was negotiated. The deal called for 15% tariffs on European exports and 0% tariffs on certain US exports. Sounds reasonable. But here's the part that matters. The deal included massive European commitments. Purchase $750 billion in U.S. energy products by 2028, invest $600 billion in American strategic sectors by 2029, eliminate tariffs on U.S. industrial goods. There's just one problem. Energy analysts calculated that even if Europe bought every available drop of American LNG and oil, they'd reach maybe $207 billion by 2028. The target is $750 billion. That's not aggressive. That's physically impossible. European natural gas demand is declining, down 2% in 2026, projected down 7% by 2030 as they transition to renewables. The United States was demanding that Europe buy energy they don't need, can't use, and that directly contradicts their climate commitments. And here's the kicker. The European Parliament hasn't ratified the Turnberry deal. And now, with the Greenland tariff announcement, multiple parliamentary groups have declared it dead on arrival. Think about what this means. The Trump administration spent months negotiating a trade framework. European Commission President von der Leyen took massive political heat for what critics called submission to American demands. And now Trump has torpedoed his own deal by threatening the same countries he just finished negotiating with. This isn't strategy. This is demolition. NATO functions on a principle called collective defense. Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all. But that only works if members believe the commitment is credible. Game theorists call this the shadow of the future. I cooperate with you today because I expect our relationship to continue tomorrow. What the tariff ultimatum did was change the shadow of the future for every NATO ally. Denmark is small, 5 million people. They cannot resist sustained American economic pressure. But every other European capital watched what happened. They observed the United States treating a founding alliance member as a vassal state, demanding territorial tribute in exchange for market access. The rational response? Hedge, diversify, reduce dependency. If America will coerce Denmark over Greenland, what stops them from coercing Germany over trade policy, France over defense cooperation, or Poland over immigration? The answer is nothing, and European capitals know it. France is accelerating strategic autonomy, the doctrine that Europe must develop independent military capabilities rather than relying on American guarantees. Germany is reconsidering decades of defense restraint. The Nordic Council issued a joint declaration rejecting U.S. overtures, presenting a unified front that didn't exist 3 months ago. European defense spending will increase, not coordinated with Washington, independent of it. French defense contractors will fill orders that would have gone to Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. European intelligence services will share less with American counterparts. We're not losing an alliance in a dramatic collapse. We're watching it hollow out from within, trust transaction by trust transaction, decision by decision, until the structure that won the Cold War becomes a shell. While Washington obsesses over Arctic ice, Beijing is watching with undisguised satisfaction. Because the defining metric of 2026 isn't military power or economic size, it's consistency. For decades, the United States accumulated what economists call trust capital, the credibility of being a reliable partner. That capital allowed us to build coalitions, set global rules, and project power far beyond our military reach. We are liquidating that capital at an astonishing rate. China's pitch to the global south isn't ideological, it's pragmatic. We don't change our deals every election cycle. We don't threaten tariffs when you disagree with us. We build ports and railways, we show up. And it's working. Canada just celebrated a strategic partnership with China, including easing tariffs and selling Chinese EVs. The EU announced it struck a deal with South America's Mercosur bloc, capping off 25 years of trade negotiations. Think about that timing. While Trump demands territorial concessions from NATO allies, Europe is finalizing comprehensive trade deals with South America. While the U.S. threatens economic warfare against Germany, Canada is easing restrictions on Chinese electric vehicles. Even Saudi Arabia, historically one of America's closest partners in the Middle East, is hedging. The kingdom has begun settling energy transactions in renminbi, issuing bonds to access Chinese capital markets, and explicitly prioritizing Asian capital flows in their investment laws. Why? Because partners who threaten tariffs over political disagreements might weaponize the dollar against you next. Better to diversify. Let me show you the actual cost-benefit analysis, because that's what this comes down to. Strategic benefits of controlling Greenland. Potential resource independence from Chinese rare earth processing, though extraction would take decades and cost hundreds of billions. Enhanced missile defense positioning, though we already have operational access through existing agreements with Denmark. Symbolic completion of North American consolidation. Total strategic value, moderate, long-term, uncertain. Economic costs. Dollar appreciation potentially 10 to 15%, devastating for manufacturing exports. If Greenland resource extraction floods the economy with trillions in natural resources, every American exporter, Boeing, John Deere, Intel, faces a currency headwind they cannot overcome. The factories that close won't be in Washington or New York. They'll be in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, the swing states that decide presidential elections. This is Dutch disease. The Netherlands discovered natural gas in 1959, celebrated the windfall, and within a decade watched their manufacturing sector collapse as the currency appreciated and cost structures inflated beyond competitiveness. Diplomatic costs, collapse of comprehensive trade agreements that took years to negotiate. erosion of NATO trust architecture built over 77 years, moral equivalence to Russian actions in Crimea, undermining coalition building against actual adversaries, acceleration of global South pivot toward China as a consistent partner, total diplomatic cost, catastrophic, permanent, irreversible. Capital Economics estimated that the tariffs would reduce GDP in targeted NATO economies by just 0.3 percentage points. The political ramifications, they warned, would be far greater than the economic ones. Any attempt to seize Greenland, they concluded, could lead to irreparable harm to NATO. Here's the conclusion I've reached after examining all the data. Acquiring Greenland solves a 20th century security problem. Resource independence, territorial buffer, missile defense, these are Cold War concerns wearing 21st century clothing. But in solving that problem, we create 21st century catastrophes: industrial decline through currency appreciation, alliance fragmentation through coercive diplomacy, global realignment through demonstrated unreliability. As Deutsche Bank's George Saravelos warned, with the U.S. net international investment position at record negative extremes, the mutual interdependence of European-U.S. financial markets has never been higher. It is a weaponization of capital rather than trade flows that would by far be the most disruptive to markets. The problem with the Greenland strategy isn't that the island is worthless. It's that the method of acquisition triggers cascading failures across every other dimension of American power. We would gain the high ground of the Arctic while surrendering the high ground of economic competitiveness, alliance leadership, and moral authority. The Trojans didn't fall because the horse was empty. They fell because they wanted the gift so badly they stopped calculating the cost. 38 million tons of rare earth oxides. Strategic Arctic positioning. The front porch of North American defense. It looks like a prize. The math says it's a trap. January 18, 2026 marked the day the United States stopped leading an alliance and started demanding rent from it. 8 countries, 77 years of partnership, $8 trillion in leverage, all put at risk for an island most Americans couldn't find on a map. The question isn't whether America can take Greenland. The question is whether America can afford what it costs. Not in dollars, but in everything else that makes a superpower actually super. Trust, reliability, the willingness of others to follow our lead, not because they have to, but because they choose to. So here's my question for you. Are we watching a master strategist execute 4D chess, or are we watching the dismantling of American power in real time? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you want to understand the calculations behind the headlines, the math that doesn't lie, even when the politicians do, subscribe right now. Because everything is about to change, and you need to see it coming. I'll see you in the next one.